I believe I am live on YouTube and I am live on Facebook at the same time, which is extremely exciting and truly like a dream come true to have a live show that is happening in multiple places at the same time. And I really feel like this is the future where we are able to use our voices to share whatever's in our heart and to have that individual impact without needing all of those things that we've needed in the past. I love seeing the music industry, so many artists using SoundCloud and YouTube to get discovered. And I feel like the same thing is happening with information, where we want to connect with the people we want to connect with and we want direct access to them instead of like a polished pre-made show that was made sometime a long time ago. So welcome everybody who's joining live. The first thing I would love to hear is where you are joining from. And a little fun thing that you could do is see who's joining from your country, maybe from your state, from your city, because we have such an international audience. And so we are going to have people join from all over the world. And I love to be a connector. There were a few videos where people connected and said, hey, you're here, let's meet up. And then they sent me a photo of them talking to each other and hanging out. Definitely in my programs, people make really big connections. All right, I'm going to do a little bit of centering because I'm going to talk about like a super sensitive topic. To be totally honest, I chickened out. I wanted to talk about trauma and PTSD and how to deal with it. And I have training in psychology, right? I went to grad school. I always say I'm half a master because I didn't complete my master's program in transpersonal psychology, my master's in counseling at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, which is no longer around. That school had closed, which was such an amazing school, an amazing program. And I didn't end up completing the practicum and becoming a marriage family therapist, but I have that background and that training. And the more that I've been diving into healing work in general and all of the mind body psychotherapy training I've done through yoga, through psychology, through law of attraction, the more that there is a little bit of discrepancy that I will talk about in a future video about why certain things aren't working for you. And a lot of times it's because you're not acknowledging your trauma and you get triggered. And when you're in that place where you're hyperactivated, you really don't have the tools available to you that you do in a more normalized state. But I chickened out. That's like a lot of things that I feel like I need to review a little bit from my grad school training because it's a sensitive topic and people have very strong opinions about it in the psychology world. And then you have the law of attraction people that tend to kind of bypass all of that and feel like we shouldn't talk about pain or trauma. And I feel like they're like, I don't want any drama. And I have coined the saying that your drama comes from your trauma, right? And until you heal your trauma, there's going to be a lot of drama because it just goes wherever you go. But I am going to talk about it from my perspective because one of my biggest traumas in my life has been to feel abandoned, unwanted, and not belonging. And if you can relate, put a 1 in the comments. If you can relate to one of your biggest painful experiences, recurring painful experiences in your life, being around feeling like I can't find a place for myself. I don't belong. I'm unwanted. And this could be in friendships, in your personal relationships, in your family relationships. And I'm seeing all of your comments here. Welcome, everyone. So put a 1 in the comments if abandonment and aloneness and not belonging has been something that you have faced and dealt with, because this is what we'll be talking about today. And I wanted to prepare and do notes for this video and to do my whole little setup where we talk about who I am. I'm Lana. I'm a mindset coach and life mastery expert, which is always a funny thing to call myself, given that that's the title I feel like other people give me, and, you know, do my little opening, turn pain to gain and manifest miracles and master your life. But I really feel like I just wanted to take a breath and have this video be completely organic. So this is something else I want to share, is that in my experience in now 6 or is it 7 years in business, right? A lot of my friends have gone on to become kind of household names, and they've got super professional videos with the teleprompters, and they've got all of this like glitz and glamour, I would say, and they still have the content they did. But I chose a distinctly different path. To me, for some reason, that was exciting. And I would much rather connect with a few people heart to heart versus millions from like a boundary perspective, from like, you can only see this far of me, because I feel like then this is only this far that you let me see of you. And I hope that we can create a community or broaden and grow the community we have here to have these discussions about life, about the challenges in life and how to turn that pain to gain, about what's possible in life, because truly the only limits that we have are the ones that we allow and that we have accepted as limits. And then really that's what life mastery is to me, success on your own terms. So I'm unscripted. And by the way, if you want to invite your friends to join, you can click and invite them to join to watch this videos or tag them, because this is something that, again, is super organic. I'm not paying for advertising to these videos. I figure I exist for those that I exist. Those that are drawn to me will want to participate and want to be a part of the show. And if not, then not. And quantity does not mean quality. So I'm looking for your engagement on this video, because I don't want to be talking to myself on this video, right? Like, I actually want to help you with whatever it is that you would like support with. And I feel like the biggest healing that I've had is listening to other people's stories and how they've dealt with things and then applying it to myself. We learn through stories. This is why a lot of times traditional talk therapy doesn't work, because you're just circling in your own story instead of broadening your perspective and creating a new story for yourself. So, trauma, abandonment. You can tell I'm stalling a little bit, right? So it's not easy, you guys, to do this real time, right? But I also feel like this is important because the world needs us, light workers, healers, just aware people, to allow ourselves to do our own healing work, to do it comfortably, confidently, powerfully, and in my personal desire, visibly, so that it can be an example for others. So my childhood, some of you know, I grew up in Russia. I was very poor. A lot of people in Russia were very poor, and especially my parents, who were young, who were college students, basically in grad school when they had me. And in Russia, obviously the communist country at the time, was very poor. So there were times when we didn't have enough food to eat, and I lived in one room with my family in Siberia. Even the bathroom and the kitchen were communal. It was like a dorm style housing, right? So not a particularly cushy childhood. My parents are extremely loving parents. My grandparents, who I grew up with, my dad's grandparents, like really, really loved us and supported us, but they had so much of their own trauma. My grandparents on my dad's side, both of them were survivors of World War II. My grandfather on my dad's side, my paternal grandfather, became an orphan with his twin brother during World War II, had to go through crazy experiences that if I had time to get into trauma, I would. But you know, this is a whole history on my Jewish side, right? My dad's Jewish. My grandmother on my dad's side went through the St. Petersburg Leningrad blockade, the longest siege in history. A whole giant city with millions of people was surrounded, and there was such intense famine that people were dying on the street. There was cannibalism. The parents were dying, telling the kids to eat them so that the kids would survive. I mean, it was such a atrocious experience that I can't even fathom it, right? And they were my grandparents. They told me stories about this. It was very much a part of my childhood. My grandfather grew up with his mom having severe bipolar because of all of the experiences that she had, or maybe not. I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. But so he had a challenging childhood. And then my mom had her own challenges. There was alcoholism and abuse, and it was really challenging because her father was actually a policeman and there was no recourse for any of his actions. And so here are two people who have done the absolute best in their childhood and have become kind of adults, right, in their early 20s, and they have a child. And what's going to happen is that they're going to do their best and they're going to do better than their parents, but they're going to be challenges. And with me, as much of healing as I've done and my husband has done, I am sure that our kids are going to go to therapy someday and have their own issues. And that goes to a point that I want to make early on is that I believe that our trauma and our wounding are actually the cracks through which the light enters, like Rumi has said, that it is actually our salvation, right? That those deep wounds are there for a reason, for us to seek healing and consciously choose it. And there's a big difference between being what we call crazy, like having a lobotomy and just not feeling any other emotion other than total bliss. You could call that enlightenment, but it is not deliberate. And you could call it in ignorance of what's happening and being one-sided, only being able to feel one thing. So the mastery, I feel, is to be able to be in any emotion and to be able to go there to see somebody in pain or to be in pain yourself, but to not have the continuation of the pain cycle within yourself, to be able to meet the pain with love, with acceptance, with a welcoming, and to allow it to be the portal into deeper self-love and clarity, and sometimes boundaries, and sometimes inspired action that you wouldn't have thought about, right? So I was a very emotional child, very sensitive child, and did have a lot of what my parents called tantrums. I would cry uncontrollably, sometimes for hours. A lot of times I knew what I wanted, and if they didn't give it to me, I would have a tantrum. And I have a lot of memories from my childhood, just laying on the floor, like wailing, hitting the floor with my hands and feeling like nobody cares. And it's not that my parents didn't care. They would try to comfort me, and 10 minutes would go by and 20 minutes would go by, and then they just didn't know what to do. So they just let me cry it out. They also, had read some of those Dr. Spock or whatever he was called books about like letting your baby cry out. My mom told me that my dad thought that that was the right way to raise a child. My dad's really educated, like PhD in math, very logical. So he read all these books and it made sense to him. So he told my mom to let me cry it out starting at like a month or something. And my mom said she didn't have the heart for it. And I just, so grateful that at least that didn't happen. But I'm sure there were some times when, my dad was watching me or whatever, that he was doing his best by letting me cry it out. And for me, that felt like abandonment. So I didn't have a lot of physical abandonment, though in Russia, the kids were really largely left to themselves. Like, I started watching my brother when I was like 8 and he was 6. You didn't have paid babysitters. You had neighbors. It was a completely different environment. And so I did not feel physically abandoned, which is a different type of abandonment, but emotionally abandoned. And then it got really, really badly triggered. Well, first of all, in my early childhood, I was always really bossy and really like the leader, I guess you would say. And somewhere around first and second grade, the kids started gossiping about me, and I got in trouble for like selling them stuff at school. Like I was an entrepreneur from a really young age, and that was not allowed in communism. And I just felt outcast from my own group. And I didn't know why. I just felt like I don't belong, right? And so I want to remind you that this is something that my grandfather experienced, my father experienced, so much so that it led my father to apply to leave the country, right? We applied to Israel and Canada, finally got into the US and emigrated here in 1993. But like, it's a generational pattern. So when I feel it, when you feel something that feels so much bigger than you, it probably is. And something that came to my awareness in my late 20s as I really was diving into all this work, and especially when I was in graduate school, that these patterns have a way of perpetuating themselves unless you create a new pattern, because you really can't stop a pattern from happening, because it's gonna go, some pattern's gonna happen, but you can start a new pattern. And I vowed to myself before I had kids, and especially after I had kids, that the buck stops here with me. Like this chain of pain, as much as I can, stops with me. And so a lot of my healing has been so I don't unconsciously, at least, pass this on to my kids. I work on it and they see me working on it. So can you relate to any of this? Can you relate to the trauma being passed on? Does it sometimes feel like hopeless, because it feels so deep and so much ingrained in the very fabric of how you look at life? And again, most law of attraction teachers and spiritual teachers don't even want to go here. And to me, embracing this really, really helps me find a way out of it. So if you can relate to this, put an emoji in the comments, your emoji about how you feel about these patterns. Coming to the US was really triggering. I definitely was an outcast. I didn't speak English properly. I had short hair and big glasses and was awkward, and we were poor. And so I didn't have cool clothes. And we went to school in San Francisco that had like bars on the windows. And for the first time, I was in like a multi-ethnic environment, right? We had everyone. And I was in English as a second language class, and we had like people from Mexico and Indonesia and China and like all over, right? But it was a little bit easier for me to still have a little Russian circle. But I got bullied. I remember being on the bus and just getting pushed around by a bunch of kids, like kind of ghetto kids, if you will. And they were just making fun of me. And I just would go home and cry because I didn't know what to do. And I'm in a new country. I only have my mom and dad, and my brother. I no longer have my extended support system of my uncle and my grandfather and all of those friends and relatives. And then in 8th grade, we moved to the suburbs in Burlingame High School. And I went to the school where basically I was too advanced for English as a second language. So I got shoved into regular classes. And I think I spent the first like 3 months of that year eating lunch alone and just going home and crying every single day. Nobody wanted to talk to me. Actually, there was one girl who was like an ESL student, like a super nerdy Asian girl who I'm so grateful for. And I don't remember her name because I don't think she stayed at that school. But she and I kind of hung out, but we had nothing in common. And I was not cool. I was not, in 8th grade was like one of the formative life experiences, right? So I felt totally outcast. And then towards the middle of the year, I will never forget a couple of people, like I could still cry, that showed me kindness. In the apartment complex where we lived, there were twins, Paul and Monica. If you're watching this, thank you. I remember to this day that you guys weren't in my grade, weren't in my school. They were a couple of years older, and you showed kindness to me. Dolly, a friend in that school, would like come and say hi to me. And then my friend Bernadette, who I'm still friends with and who I'm going to be seeing, she became my best friend all through high school, who like made me feel like I'm not alone. But that whole year, I think it really impacted me, a feeling like what am I doing here? Nobody likes me. Nobody wants me. I don't exist. I felt invisible in many ways. And in my own family, my parents were trying to survive. They were trying to get a job. They're trying to put food on the table. I had no relatives. Like, it ran deep, you know what I mean? And it took me years to really unpack this and to really allow myself to feel it deeply and to realize how many gifts that situation brought me. It allowed me to really get to know myself and what I'm made of, because I didn't have anyone else. There came a point that I just thought, well, I gotta like me. And this was very early on. I was like, well, nobody likes me. Can I like me? Because I'm hanging out with me all the time. And then later in life, I felt like I spent time trying to adapt and belong, and I wasn't very successful at it. In high school, I felt like I never really belonged. And in college, it's okay because I was at Berkeley and there were a bunch of people who didn't belong. But it continued. Interestingly enough, in my romantic relationships, I didn't find so much abandonment triggers in terms of not belonging, but I did have this feeling of somebody not being there for me emotionally. And I manifested that quite a bit in my early relationships, and then really did some healing work. And again, what is healing work? I could spend 3 hours talking about that. More. I could spend a lifetime. A lot of therapy early on. And I do want to say that going to a therapist who really, the criterion was that I felt better afterwards. I felt more empowered. I felt like I had a new perspective on myself. I felt like I had new tools instead of just regurgitating. I'm not a believer in going to the same therapist, especially for years and years and years. I feel like something's wrong then, because really they need to come in and empower you to move on your own and create those relationships in your life. A lot of healing experiences, yoga. Started practicing when I was 19, my mid 20s, did the yoga teacher training, started teaching yoga, all that came with yoga, a lot of workshops and, all of the law of attraction trainings, all of the Abraham workshops and cruises I've been on, Bashar trainings, Agape, Michael Beckwith, all of that. Like, I have done so much work with so many people and so many different things. And all of it has been a part of my healing journey. So I do want to say that it's an ongoing thing. And it's something that I hope you continue to invest in. But what I'm here to remind you is that there is a way out, meaning there is healing. And so how it still shows up in my life is there are times, and especially recently, I had kind of readjustment, falling outs, I guess, or just recalibration with my closest friendships. My core group of friends who kind of don't all know each other, but some of them are aware of each other. But like I had a falling out with one friend that was really painful, then another one, then a third one. And it was like the closest people to me. And all of that got triggered, and especially in a place where I have so many followers and friends on social media and so many acquaintances. And it can be so challenging to feel so alone. And it got triggered this past weekend. I had a really big week. I released my website last week. I had so many people sign up for my manifesting playbook and meditations. I did the first LanaLive. The response has been amazing. Thank you for that. And at the same time, there was this feeling of I'm doing something wrong. There are people who do this better, and I'm not someone who's successful, and I don't belong here doing this. Like, should I even do this stupid show? Like, who's gonna watch it? And there was like this kind of triggering a feeling, I don't know, different that happened, and it makes me want to shut down. And so one of my defense mechanisms is that if I notice somebody's pulling away or judging me in some way, I will very quickly clamp down, be like, oh, before you have a chance to abandon me or reject me, I'm going to do it first. Boom, ironclad wall comes up, right? And it's not something that I'm proud of. It's really prevented me from opening my heart so many times, though I do believe there's a reason for that. And so I feel like it's this dance that I dance, that I want to hear from you how you dance this dance of opening up your heart, but doing it in a safe way. And so for me, it's been about developing the ability to feel safe within myself. So this weekend, when I was triggered from certain things that happened with some friends, and with my husband, because my husband will frequently just not be able to be there for me because he's his own person. He has his own needs. As much as he loves me, he can't drop everything and be there at the drop of a hat. So that when that trigger comes up, to really soften in it and to acknowledge it and allow it, because for so many years I binge ate, right? I mean, all through my early 20s and mid 20s, I would just try to stuff those feelings as deep as I could. I know other people have other addiction patterns and numbing mechanisms. It could be social media, it could be sex, it could be any number of things. If you're open to sharing here that you have coping mechanisms, again, I invite you to, but I know this is a sensitive subject. And in the end, you just can't run away from yourself, right? And this weekend, I really kind of closed everything off and I decided I'm going to talk to myself. And I shared this with my mastermind program that I have this app called Voxer that I do a lot of masterminding with my buddies with. And I actually ended up sending notes to myself. And a few of them were just purging how I feel, just expressing it, just so I can hear myself and allow myself to feel heard, because that's the antidote to feeling unseen, unheard, unimportant, abandoned. And then the second part of it was that I asked myself, how would I like to feel? And I wanted to feel safe. And I wanted to feel like I'm good. I'm worthy of someone's attention and I deserve it. And so I ended up visioning on that. And then I ended up focusing and inviting experiences into my life that matched that vibration. So I did end up reaching out to a friend who I feel that with. I had an amazing conversation. I ended up watching a movie. I ended up being with my kids. I ended up, yesterday, I ended up actually going to get my nails done, which I rarely do, but I just realized it makes me feel like taken care of. And I am willing to give myself that gift instead of be looking for others to do it for me. And it's incredible what happens when I identify a need that I have and then I meet my need, which sometimes requires me to get very creative. But I promise you, there still has not been a need that I haven't been able to meet on myself in some way or another. It may involve other people, but it was self-initiated and self-permitted and allowed. And that's been the answer of then inviting life to deliver to me other experiences that match it from other people. So the healing, it turns out, is about that wound being the light through which I see myself and embrace myself and release that internalized inner criticism that maybe was started by other people who criticized me, but had continued within myself. So I feel like I got through that, right? I did want to say one more thing, and then I want to open up for some questions in the last few minutes because I get a lot of questions about this in my academy. So it made me who I am. Like, people in my program will tell you how inclusive I am, which is a really weird term for me. I don't like, I just feel like I want everyone to feel welcome. And it's because I didn't feel welcome. If you've ever been to my house, whether you are a friend of a friend or anyone, you're going to experience that Russian hospitality, but with a little dose of extra Lana welcoming, because it really matters to me that at least in my own environment, um, everyone feels as welcome as they are. Everyone feels welcome as they are. So it has given me some of my greatest gifts, my ability to be here on video with you and to do this work visibly, and to share so much. I don't think that would have happened had I felt so invisible for most of my life, that it's like a need to be visible that I have, that I think other people just don't have. So they choose other professions and other experiences. So it's brought so many gifts. And I think that that's what happens on the other side of wounding, is that when you go through that process of forgiveness, self-forgiveness, forgiveness of others, acknowledgement, healing, you inevitably end up with appreciation. And by the time that you appreciate who you've become, what you've learned, what you've gained, what you've received, there's actually nothing left to forgive. I just don't feel like anything's gone wrong, or I would take those experiences back. And this also allows me to be in the place with my own kids and with myself when I face challenges. I really remember that this is going to serve me, it's going to serve them, and I don't try to protect them from any kind of challenges. Of course, I want my kids to be safe, but I also understand that they're going to go through formative experiences in life. And the best that I can do is to show them that you can come through anything and heal and thrive and be able to turn that pain to gain. Whew. Melanie saying, identify the need, and then finding it for myself. And that seems like such a nonsensical thing, right, Mel? Like, well, how can I give something to myself that somebody else is supposed to give me? And a lot of us have that trauma from our parent not being able to give something. And we have this built-in biological need to be loved by our parents, even if they don't love us, even if they abandon us, right? And how do you give a love of a parent to yourself? So if you take this too literally, I think you're going to lose the point and feel like this is nonsensical. But ultimately, what I wanted, what anybody wants, is to feel safe, is to feel seen, is to feel understood, is to feel welcome, is to feel valued and valuable. And those are things that I have learned over the years. I have far more, I don't want to say control, but like influence on, than I have given credit for. And a lot of it is mindset work, not actually going out and doing action, telling people they need to be different. That's highly ineffective. And I just had somebody in my program tell me how incredible it is that somebody who she's been in a relationship with, has a child with, she felt like was completely unchangeable, was never going to meet her needs. How doing this mindset work that we've been doing has now completely transformed that person to the point where she's like, oh my God, it's me. I changed. He changed. I can't believe this. She literally was like, I cannot, in our mastermind session yesterday, my mastermind partner, she's like, I cannot believe that I held the key, but I would have never believed you had you told me that. So again, a lot of mindset work will create this amazing breakthrough for you in any area of life. And I feel like this is an important thing to talk about especially because these limits that might seem nothing to do with like your career or your business, or I think most people would connect feeling abandoned, alone, and not belonging to at least personal relationships. But I promise to you, it seeps through and it impacts everything in your life. That it's like a certain color glasses that when you wear it, everything looks in that hue. And it's amazing when you realize, oh, that was just like a lens I was wearing. And you take off that lens and everything looks so different. Does this make sense, guys? Um, Regina is saying so many people are posturing and posing so much. And because I am an empath, I often find myself running away from people for self protection. That's a really great topic for future Lana TV. As an empath myself, or at least I'll define it because I think that there's many ways to define it. I have learned, have had to learn over the years how to function as a person in this world, and how to have boundaries and protect myself. Funny side note, one of the reasons I do not smoke marijuana is because my empathic tendencies get extra exacerbated and I can't be in a public environment at all. I literally hear people's thoughts and feel their energy more intensely, and it just feels too overwhelming. So those are things I don't do because it impacts me that way, right? But Regina's asking, do you have any tips for maintaining authenticity in the presence of people who are all ego? Well, Regina, everything is a mirror back to us. So the people aren't all ego or no ego, but that's the way that you are perceiving them currently. And everything that I perceive, if somebody says something really mean, I just had a really challenging experience happen with someone in my program, feeling really misunderstood and unheard, and speaking about it publicly in my program about me. Right. So I felt attacked in my own program. And it would have been really easy to judge and to say, hey, you're bad and you're wrong and you misinterpreted this. And you know, that prayer of, is it St. Francis? I can't remember now. It is better to be, to understand versus be understood or something. And what I realized is that if I react to this and don't actually receive the gift here, then I'm missing the point of why I co-created this experience. Because the trigger, you see, is not a trigger for everyone. 10 people could have that interaction and have totally different interpretations. So what I've recognized, if something triggers me in a really, really positive way or a really painful way, it's for me. And if it triggers someone else, then it's for them, right? So if they're telling me, hey, you're triggering me, I'm like, good, you get something juicy to explore. So my suggestion would be to reflect on what you identify as a big ego person and why you find that so horrible and why you either judge it or reject it. And to be able to come to a place where somebody could be in that experience, but it doesn't impact you. You can just walk away or just kind of smile, or you don't have an emotional reaction. It feels neutralized, right? So I hope that's helpful. Regina's talking about that I've worked so hard to break the cycles. You know what? This is such an interesting point too, because working hard to break the cycles is so, I hate to say it, it's counterproductive. And this is really hard for me to say because I've been there. I'm still there some days. But you see, at its core, self-love doesn't feel like hard work. And if it does, then there's an opportunity to adjust it. Now, in the last few years specifically, I really can't say that I worked hard at this like I did early on. And I think it's important to do that work until you're pushed by pain until you're pulled by a vision. I was pushed by that pain to do all that hard work and go to therapy and feel the painful feelings and to do all this and until I realized, okay, I can create a vision of what I want and let that calm me and move me. And I think that's appropriate at every stage of that experience. And eventually, I don't want to say I'm enjoying the process, but I don't get surprised when it comes up. I'm not like, oh, here I am again, back in the same ish all over again. Like, oh, I thought I dealt with this. I hear so many people say like, oh, I've done so much work on this. And I'm just like, well, I don't think you'll ever be done with it. Like, it's not something to be done with. Like, I have accepted that for the rest of my life, when I am in a place that I'm vulnerable and ready to go to the next level. When there's pressure on my system, these are my cracks. These are going to be the triggers. And so when it comes up, I know it's because I am changing and going to the next level. I have reframed that whole experience, and it's not particularly fun in some moments, but I find a way to enjoy it. It's the same way that I used to teach yoga. I said, stretch your definition of enjoyment so that you can enjoy all the poses. And there's even kind of an interesting enjoyment that starts to happen when there's that feeling of intense pain and discomfort. And I notice it and I embrace it and I hold myself and I talk to myself and I don't know, there's something like really divinely and sacredly human about it, that I now appreciate, that I have this capacity to feel, and that I feel like I spent so many years numbing it. I realize that I just appreciate feeling. If that makes sense, I don't know if you can relate. Um, and I think we all have unique healing journeys, and that's something that I've really taken into my programs and into everything I say, that there is no right way to do this. But here are the ways that I have done it, that I've seen other people do it. And also there's some like markers about the process that you'll know are moving you in a direction. You'll feel better and better. You'll feel more empowered. You'll feel more okay when triggers happen. You'll feel sometimes even more excited about those opportunities. Your inner dialogue will shift about them. How you react in those situations will shift. All of that is progress. And if we're not looking for perfection and we're celebrating the progress, then there's so much joy that we could have by seeing those 1-degree shifts that add up, that add up, that add up. And now, with my husband, I already know, like, hey, I'm feeling triggered. Like, I need to walk away. I already know when he's triggering me, like, here are the things that don't work for me. Like, you start to develop ways of taking care of yourself through this process. And that's, I think, the healing that a lot of us have been looking for from other people, for them to change the environment, for them to change how they treat us and speak to us, for them to change their behavior so that we could feel better. And that's so backward because all of the power is in their hands and none of it is in mine. And I don't like to feel like I'm just handing somebody else the power of how I feel. And so it's been a journey of reclaiming and taking back that empowerment. So I hope this have been useful. I know that this is a very, very deep conversation. And there's so much more that we could share. I hope this starts the conversation here with us. I hope that it's a conversation that you continue with those close to you. I hope that it gives you some awareness or insight that can actually move you forward into deeper healing and self-revealing and soaring, because that is exactly why I'm doing this. If you feel inspired to share this video with anyone or tag them, I would love to add anybody who resonates in the conversation. I am going to be in the comments later talking about this, responding. This is an interactive show. I could have just recorded a video and put it up on YouTube like I used to do, but I wanted this to be a real life experience. And I will be back every Monday up until Christmas at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. I have kind of done a terrible job marketing this because I'm scared, honestly. I get nervous. This is my second episode and you want me to squirm, get this 100,000 views and I'll be squirming because I'm coming out, but this is still on the edge for me. You know what I mean? And so I'm okay with where we're at. But I do hope that more people receive the message instead of the messenger. Do you know what I mean? Like, I hope that this has ripples. I hope that you start to have more of these conversations with your friends, your partners, your children, your family members. This is a conversation I have with my children. I will end on this anecdote. That's something that I started a long time ago, well, with my twins when they first, started talking, as we had this little game where I'd say, who loves you the most, right? I think a lot of people say that. And I taught them to say myself. And we would do this, and other people would just laugh when they heard it. Who just, Haylin, who's 2.5, is doing that. Who do you love the most? Who loves you the most? Aylin. Aylin. I said, and who after that? Mommy. And who after that? Daddy. And who after, and I feel like this has been a part of my healing, is to allow my children to have a different environment. And in offering it to them, I'm offering it to myself. It's one more reminder to myself that I love myself the most. And this gives permission to everyone else to love me and embrace me and accept me. So again, if this has been useful, please let me know. Let me know what else you would want to talk about on this topic, because we've just covered we've opened up a big Pandora's box. And I'm happy to really do more videos on certain elements of this. And I hope to bring some interviews with you to you in the future with people that I really admire personally. I'm not going to bring anybody here who I don't personally admire and respect and like totally vibe with. By the way, I would love to be able to do a dance party, but I will get shut down by YouTube, by Facebook, by Instagram, by everyone. If there's any live music that's copyrighted, I would love, this is what I used to do with my guests, is to start everything with a dance party. You know how much I love dancing and expressing in that way. But until I have a budget for music that I want to dance to, we're not going to do that just yet. But I just want to say that I'm really grateful that you're watching and that you are participating in this discussion. And I can't wait to dish up whatever it is that we decide is going to be the most valuable topic next week. Sending you all my love.